like about that is that a lot of what we can say about corporate art collecting can really be translated over into like personal art collecting as well. So I also want to encourage that if there are questions that come up within the context of this conversation from anyone who's viewing it, and you're like, oh, well, this might not have to do specifically with like business or corporation zoning artwork. I do think that the discussion surrounding other kinds of questions can really easily fold in. So I don't want to like dissuade anyone from like bringing things you might have questions about to the discussion if and when there's time. So I kind of want to run this as just kind of like the three of us having a conversation, but I do want to hear mostly from Amy and Andrew, but I will chime in as is appropriate for me to do so. I thought what might be a way to get us started though is, Jamie, I know you have a lot of clients who are businesses, who are corporations, who collect, and you have had quite a number of years experience in developing those relationships and also kind of helping businesses maintain and sort of keep fresh their collections. I wondered if you could just give us like a couple quick bullet points on like what is a corporate art collection? Like why does a business want to collect art? Why is that a good idea?
Hi everybody, I'm Jamie. I guess I'll start by saying I think, corporate art collections are, that's a term you kind of hear tossed around quite a lot. And so I just wanted to be clear too out of the gate. I think that's used pretty loosely in a lot of scenarios just to kind of refer to a company, right? DeGroot Fine Art does work with a lot of really big companies, which is more specifically like a corporate collection. But I think anything that I kind of reference here can be regarded in any size company, right? And it's really about getting a company at whatever level some sort of engagement with art. And so to answer your question about why companies have collections, I think that's something that has really changed a lot probably over the years. I think a lot of people think of corporate collections and maybe like the heyday in the 90s or something, and they were collecting for a different reason potentially. And I can't really speak to that if I'm being honest, because I was still in school and getting my feet wet with art and all that, but I can speak to the climate now, which is, I think, quite a bit different in what I'm experiencing. People in companies these days, I think more than they want to invest in sort of a collection from a monetary perspective, I think they're interested in investing in a collection so that they're investing in their community, and that includes the people that work for them and also the greater art community that they're in. So we're experiencing a really kind of exciting time for companies where they're I kind of equated it, I guess, to like a farm to table type experience, sort of spreading now over to corporate collecting in a way where people want to hear like an origin story, right? They want to know where these things came from, and they want to feel connected to the things that are around them. So we've been put in kind of a really great position to start nourishing like our local community and the people around us, helping them to create connections like with their art community. So a lot of this kind of boils down to education in a lot of ways. So just teaching people, about art and getting people to feel comfortable kind of loving what they love and collecting what they want to collect, right? So kind of circling back to your first question of, why do people collect? That there's a million reasons for that answer. And sometimes it's their love of art. Sometimes it's, from a hobbyist perspective of, for the company. Sometimes it is for retention, actually. People find that if companies have art, and particularly if they have hip, interesting art, it is going to attract a different demographic of people to work for your company, and it also makes them feel really good when they're there, so they'll stay longer. So there's a lot of reasons and a lot of value to bringing art to a company. kind of environment that I think a lot of people don't think about. There are some that are less enchanting that probably have to do more, you know, with taxes and things like that, assets, which we deal with, of course. But I think the lion's share these days are collecting artwork because they love it. And so that makes our jobs really fun.
Yeah, and I want to kind of like transition that question and everything you've kind of said, because something that I think a lot about, especially in relationships to collecting from, you know, a corporate or business has a collection. I think of those collections as sort of public spaces. And so there gets to be this interesting line for me between like a private collection, which is in someone's home. So you have that on one end. And then you have public collections. Either it's like a museum or like a foundation or something that's readily available to the public. And businesses or corporate collections kind of sit in between that sometimes, because you know, you have a collection that is there where people are viewing it. It's in a public or semi-public space, either for employees or workers or people associated with the business, or like as you were mentioning, either clients or visitors who come into the space. And so I kind of want to sort of transition everything you've said and talk to Andrew and speak about like what do you think about like art in these sort of semi-public settings as a sort of booster of like the quality of life, like a quality of life of the work environment, and kind of like if you can speak to like art as that kind of like a necessity or like a positive boon for the like a workspace.
Right.
As someone who's sitting in front of like 30 works of art right now.
Well, art is meant to be seen, and should be seen as much as possible, right? Like first and foremost. And I think that's the job of the gallerist, the art dealer, is to place art with people that care about it and want to view it. And I'm always especially excited when something is placed in an institution or a foundation or a corporate collection, especially corporate collections that have a good amount of reach, whether it's within their business or if they're a lending collection, which I think those corporate collections are really important, the ones that are lending works to other exhibitions as well. But I think, of course, like that's an exciting thing to talk about with the artist on the one hand, and with the curator or the person that's managing that corporate collection. And I think that with the best collections, that's an important priority for them. How is this art that they're going to acquire and put in, whether it's in a semi-public place or even a more private place for their employees, how is that going to be enjoyed and experienced? So those things are absolutely critical and always exciting. I mean, I don't think there's an artist that I've placed a work in a corporate collection with who hasn't wanted to understand that and know that that was the case.
Yeah, I think before I started personally, before I started like working in a space where I was placing, working with businesses to place works in those kinds of collections as opposed to private collections in people's homes, I think I had kind of a weird stigma kind of against the idea of like corporate collections. I wonder if either of you feel like there is socially out there kind of like perhaps like a negative connotation towards the idea of like a corporate collection, because I find that to be very much the opposite. Like everything you were saying, Andrew, about like the important work that a corporate collection can do, having these works visible, but also with the possibility of having them as lending to museum exhibitions or other exhibitions worldwide, that like they help facilitate not just the works being seen in their space, but also elsewhere.
I think probably Jamie, what you were just starting to touch on about how corporate collections may have shifted, let's say over the last 30 years, or even over the last 20 years, it seems to me that the stigma attached to that has changed because of transparency. I think corporations are generally more, at least leaning towards more transparency and better understanding, maybe more education, sort of around a collection and also maybe before they're acquiring work. But I'm sure Jamie can speak to that more.
Sure. I mean, yes, there's definitely a lot of, let's call it translating, I guess, that happens in the middle. And I think that's a big part of our job in a way, is to get, companies to understand where artists are coming from and get artists to understand where companies are coming from. Because I do think there are quite often misconceptions about, maybe there's a big company and they're trying to take advantage of an artist, or the other way around, maybe there's a company that just doesn't understand why an artist is being so difficult or whatever. There's always a moment of kind of teaching, I think, in there. And I think what I can say after years of doing this is I don't think anyone's, in my experience, out to get anybody else. It's always very much of an intention of positivity all the time, especially from the company's perspective. Sometimes it just takes a little, explaining as to how these different worlds work, right? We can't always know. I don't always know what a banker's life experience is like, and they don't always know what, an artist's life experience is like. So when you really get down to brass tacks and kind of explain, this is where they're coming from and why they, might want to be valued for their artwork, to have it lent, let's say, to a rotating exhibition or something, then the company starts to go, oh, okay, so it isn't just an opportunity for them to have something up that's not enough. Like, oh, okay, I get that. So sometimes you just have to kind of connect the dots for people and get everyone to see that, we're all kind of in it together to try to get the same thing done, which is to kind of give opportunity to art. And so, for companies too, I think, like Andrew was saying, it has changed, and they are trying to keep up with the times in a way, and they really are doing their best, but they are still a company. They have a lot of red tape, they have lots of paperwork. That's why we all have jobs over here at DeGroot Fine Art. We're all paperwork, contracts, all that. But when we get down to the humanity of it, and when we're talking to people and picking out art with them, there's so much interest right now in diversity and in supporting local communities. We don't just do it here, but if we travel somewhere else, the first thing they say, if we're in Ohio or Michigan or wherever, is just like, how do we help our local artists? They want this, everyone wants this. It's just a matter of like, how do you get it done and get everybody to feel really good about it?
Trying to like organize like a few questions here to kind of spring off of what you were saying, but also kind of lead into one another. And I liked how you said about like trying to get like basically everything you just said about like connecting the dots. And I kind of wonder if we could spend some time looking, it's kind of a question for like both of you, and which is how would you recommend somebody, if they want to start a collection for their business, go about beginning something like that?
Andrew, you want to go first?
That might be Jamie.
That was mine. I was going to say, get an art advisor. No.
Right.
I think the first way to start is to get interested, right? Like we're in this fantastic world of technology and magic where things are just coming at you. You can look at things, it's amazing. You can kind of get your sea legs and see what's out there to some degree. But I think from a company perspective, usually these people are pretty busy, and this isn't something that they have a lot of extra time to do. So I think maybe starting with, why and what you're interested in as a company, and, getting sort of a goal set or like a brand identity or a mission statement kind of put together, just having some sort of idea of what you envision, right? And then maybe getting something to help you execute that. And so that's kind of the role of the consultant in that way, is, you know, coming in and hearing someone out and saying, okay, what do you see and how can I get you the best version of that articulated on your walls? You know, that's what we're here for. There are other attributes that go into that. You know, people always want to think they are investing in something, so we do our best to kind of guide them into choices for acquisitions that are thoughtful ones. So sometimes that means that they are hitting their goals as a company for like diversity, or maybe it's just like a theme in the building that they want to execute, you know, or whatever it is. We want to hit those goals for them and get them the best version of that. And while we do that, we, you know, vet our artwork and the people that we work with and try to get, you know, a balance of their needs, and also, you know, what is the best of the best out there right now that suits their purposes. So basically my answer is get an art advisor. That's how you start.
Andrew, what's your answer? Get a dealer?
Well, I was going to say, it seems, and Jamie, please tell me if I'm right. I don't know. It seems like either corporate collections, maybe depending on size, either have in-house curators and managers, or they have an advisor. Jamie, do you work with any collections that already have their own curator in place and you're working directly with them?
Yeah, actually, Andrew, I think that's a really interesting question. And I think that's something like, I think I'm still curious as well in some ways, but you know, every company is set up a little bit differently. I think there is this kind of, maybe it's like a misconception that if somebody has a curator that they don't have an advisor necessarily. That's actually not true. We work a lot with in-house curators for companies. So, you know, especially larger ones where they have a broader reach. I'll give the example of Bank of America. We work for them. They have an entire art department, you know, that is handling so much minutia you wouldn't even believe, because they're lending their pieces. There's bits and pieces moving all over the place all the time. So that department isn't necessarily going to be able to execute a project like in a region that they don't normally, you know, operate in. So they kind of have these different regions. So we're the Midwest region. So if something pops up in, you know, Michigan or South Dakota, they call on us to kind of come in and help advocate for them. And then we work with them specifically to get their goals accomplished, and then use our, you know, list of incredible vendors and vetted, you know, experienced people to help them get their goals accomplished. So that's kind of one way that it can be set up, is just as like a combination of a regional advisor with a company that has a curator. The other way that we sometimes see it set up is just, you know, they'll come to us and create sort of a vendor relationship where, you know, we are their art consultant, no matter where it is in the country, let's say. And any and every art related thing that pops up, they come to us and say, hey, you know, somebody knocked their chair into this painting, it needs to be conserved. Can you come help us with that out in Iowa? Or, hey, we want to remove a public sculpture off of this street. Can you help us figure that out? So, I mean, it can range. And then I will also say the other lion's share of what's going on right now in our experience is just, we're having a real construction boom right now, especially in Chicago, for companies. And, you know, we're in a pandemic, obviously that's not news, but what is kind of interesting about that is that, you know, all these buildings that are being built are empty right now. So we're seeing this huge interest in trying to get artwork up and buildings built and everything looking so spiffy for people when they come back right? So there's this excitement for coming back. There's this excitement for using this time efficiently so that, you know, in normal times, we're coming in and we're helping companies kind of deal with these swing spaces where they're, you know, putting people together, and then we're rehabbing a certain area and updating it with artwork, and then they swing back. Well, that I don't think is going to be happening anymore because we're not crunching anybody in his faces. But instead, we've been incredibly busy trying to help people get things done while there's no one in the offices. So I guess I bring that up so as to say there's just a ton of construction projects. So we'll get contacted from, you know, any amount of companies saying, hey, we're rebuilding an office and we could use your help from the ground up. And that really is quite an intense process and sometimes takes a long time. It involves blueprints and you know, planning and working with designers and finishes on the wall and all that. It's very exciting and cool part of our job. And right now it's a big part of it. So there are just a lot of different ways that people access advisors and work with them. So it's not always just one thing or the other. I think it takes a village in a lot of scenarios to get it done.
Something, I mean, I have a real, it's a love relationship. I was thinking of a pithy, I hope it doesn't sound bad, like comment when you were talking about, you know, we have art dealers, we have gallerists, we have advisors, we have collection managers, which can exist for corporations as well as just private collections. Individuals also will have collection managers and curators for their collection that work for them. And I was thinking in my head, like, oh, you'd be surprised how many people can be involved, as you were saying, in you know, the acquisition and installation of an artwork. And I know, like, we're all, you know, Andrew and I are speaking from a sort of like art dealer perspective, and you from a consultant and facilitator perspective. And in the respective of the idea of community as well, I wanted to bring up that, like, you know, I find that most collections, either a corporate collection, a business collection, a private collection, a personal collection, a lot of them tend to start from a very local level. And that can mean finding like an advisor or consultant in your area who knows the area and can work for you. It can be visiting the galleries in your city that you live in, but it can also be finding the artists directly that are in your city. And there are, you know, numerous ways in which to do that. It can be through galleries, it can be through Instagram, it can be through, well, gosh, any number of ways, but auctions, for instance. You know, I wonder if either of you can speak to the sort of I don't want to say cons. I really just want to focus on the pros, because I think it's a very positive thing to build a foundation of a collection that's beginning out from a perspective of I know regional gets a really bad term, so I'll just say like a local community, and how that can sort of build and expand.
Andrew, I feel like I just keep yakking, so
I know. Well, how to answer that? I mean, I don't see it. I do think Eric, I do think you're right about, I think a lot of corporate or business collecting begins as it's personally motivated by somebody at the top of that company. I think there's a lot of private collectors that also have moved their companies into collecting. And I think that's related to the fact that you either get the bug for this or you don't, right? I mean, I think we really have, like, over the years, I've learned that, like, you can't collecting in the real sense of that word, which is not just investing in art, not buying things for the wall, but really collecting the work of an artist or artist from a gallery, like really building a relationship. That's something that not everybody has, and not everybody arrives at. So it starts with a very personal thing to begin with. I don't really most of the corporate collections that are regular clients of mine are bigger than than Chicago, or not even located in Chicago. But that's probably in part because the ones that are local to Chicago, Jaime DeGroot's involved in. We really rely on a handful of advisors locally for a lot of that placement, art placement. So those relationships are with the advisor or consultant first, and then the company, the collection corporation second. But
well, I wonder if
yeah.
No, go ahead.
Well, the last thing I was going to say was, however, all that being said, the really big collection, like corporate collections in this country especially, don't buy. They're not like cherry picking only the artists from our program that are like most well known outside of the city. They collect from us deeply. They collect from the gallery because they believe in our program. So what that ends up doing is makes everything feel a little local automatically, because they're buying artists that we've worked with for 20 years that have had notoriety and outside of Chicago, but they're also buying the artists that we've worked with for a year who is just starting out. And to me, that part of it feels like they're coming to Chicago, they're coming to the gallery, they're looking at an artist and they're buying local, for lack of a better way of saying it. They're still buying local. So there's a lot of that happening, I think, with the best of them.
I know the two of you have worked together on placing work, and so I wonder, from like a sort of consultant, and I'm wondering if we're all seeing the same triangle of people. So I'm like motioning to you two, if that's working.
I always do that. I'm like, I don't know this Brady Bunch thing.
Right? I'm wondering if the two of you can just do like a super brief or like super quick kind of walkthrough of like, how do y'all work together placing an artwork? Like, what does that look like?
You want me to start, Andrew?
I wake up every day and I wait for, hopefully, for James DeGroot to call me. Go ahead. That's actually a short answer of it. That really is the truth. But yeah, go ahead.
Well, I don't know that it's that simple on our end, Andrew, and you have a very complex relationship to what we do. So I will try my best to explain it. But I think it kind of actually piggybacks a little bit on what you were talking about before, Andrew, where it's like, you sort of naturally become local when you start working with anybody in the community, right? So when I'm hired by a company, part of what they're hoping to get are these connections that I have, and this time I've spent investing in, finding, what's special out there, who is special, who do we want to be working with, right? So they are excited to have this connection through an advisor to a gallery, right? So once that combo is kind of presented, there isn't really a whole lot of second guessing. They're just like, oh yeah, this is great. Like, this gallery seems fantastic. Let's learn more about it. So how I then relate to Andrew, I think more specifically, in an instance, so I'll just like give an example. So if I'm working with a company and they let's say they want to bring some sort of like theme in, like art, like an art deco theme for the new age or something. I mean, I'm just pulling random things here, but You know, I would of course go through my little like vintage, you know, card catalog in my head, thinking about all the ways that we could do this. But another really great option for me is to reach out to Andrew and give him that email he's waiting for and say, hey, Andrew, I'm looking for some Art Deco stuff that might relate. Like, how do you understand that with your stable of artists? Like, is there any connection you can make that I don't know about that you could present to work, or you know, highlight something that might be a nice fit for these people? And sometimes it's theme, sometimes it's size, sometimes I'm looking for something to go on this wall and it's X by X, and you know, what do you got cooking over there? And Andrew will send options over, you know, or I'll say, hey, I remember that painting that you had in the show like a couple, you know, months ago. Is that still here or whatever? So we work very closely in that way. You know, I work obviously with the people who work with me, the great people who work with me. Hi, everybody who might be here. But our business isn't just this singular pod. It's almost like Andrew works with us, right? He's like just down the block, but like our arms are really out there connecting to all these galleries. So it's really crucial that that line of communication is open. And then once a work is, you know, maybe brought to light, then we bring it to the client and show them and get them excited about it. And if they decide to move forward with it, you know, we'll put it on hold, we'll go through all the logistics, we'll work out all the paperwork, and then in a best case scenario, it gets acquired and everyone wins.
You're talking to other galleries?
Oh, I'm sorry.
I
Okay, it's fine, it's fine.
I have a question for you. It's kind of a silly question, maybe. When you start that process, how often is it like you ask galleries, something fits? We kind of know working with you what that back and forth looks like. But do you is there ever anything where like you find a piece at a gallery and within a day the collection has agreed they want to, like, are there ever any like really quick turnarounds?
Did I mention I work with companies, Andrew? No.
Yeah, no, I know.
I mean, we would love that. We would love nothing more than to make that just happen like a lickety split. But I think that's, again, why we have a job. There is just a lot that kind of goes into that. And I think there's a lot of patience involved in kind of getting through that process. So we always appreciate when galleries like kind of understand or take the time to understand, you know, where we're coming from. And, you know, we're all trying to get, you know, to the same finish line together, but sometimes it takes a little bit of time to work through a company's apparatus. And, you know, each company is different. Sometimes they're a little quicker, sometimes it takes 90 days, sometimes it'll take a year, who knows, but it's, there's not really often a quick answer.
Have you ever had a situation where they're kind of totally hands off and they just give you a budget and you get to go find art?
So like, just, sorry, I didn't totally hear that. It kind of broke out a little bit.
You know, there are some like legendary corporate collections in contemporary art that kind of like when you go to an art fair, they'll come through and they'll just buy a bunch of art. Basically, they buy it rather quickly. Have you had something like that as an opportunity? And I wonder if that's a dangerous thing. We kind of given like complete control.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I don't think we tend to get those sort of like supermarket sweep type scenarios thrown at us, but I think part of that is because we very much pride ourselves on being custom in how we handle each company. So that means our style of presenting artwork or going through that process is very different for each client, and it has to do with their goals and how they want to get it done and who with in their company. And so, you know, that's not to say it couldn't happen. And there are scenarios that get closer to that, Andrew, where like maybe we're really close to a buy with a company and it happens to land around the time that there is an art fair, and we can kind of flag, and it's just the timing really lines up and it works out. So that's always nice. But you know, art fairs in general are a little tough. We definitely go. We definitely love seeing everything. It's a great opportunity to connect with gallerists and artists, and kind of make, you know, I called it my vintage card catalog, but you make that bigger, right? When you go there and you kind of make those connections, and you never know when you're going to use them later. So art fairs are very crucial things for us. It's also, you know, been a little nice actually, that I know there's ups and downs to the virtual art fairs these days, but as art advisors, we've kind of enjoyed that because we've been very busy, and it's given us an opportunity to see a lot more than we might have been able to see otherwise, with a little bit more transparency. But I say that with the caveat of knowing that there's nothing that replaces seeing artwork in person. And that is something we're up against on the daily in our job, and that we are, I'm just like a parrot in every meeting telling people, like, truly, you cannot decide something based on your screen or an Instagram post. Like, that is not what art is about. And that's why they bring us, because we've gone and seen that thing at a fair, ideally, or at a gallery opening or whatever it may be. But to know what it is about it that makes it transcend a computer, right? So, you know, I got a little lost in my question there, Andrew, but yeah, no, I'm not out there just fine art like crazy lady. I wish I was. Someday.
Something I like is that both of you have kind of folded in a couple of different questions that were asked beforehand, because I know there were a few people that wondered how art fairs played a role in the acquisition of art for a company. Obviously, that can also be for anyone, really. And obviously, this past year has been very different because the art fairs are not IRL experiences. They're, you know, more like boutique Amazon marketplaces. And obviously that has pluses and minuses. You can't see work in person, but there is a sense that you do get to see more and spend a little more time with what you're looking at. It's not, you know, you can look at everything because it's right there. I wanted to ask, and Andrew, I think you kind of touched on this a little bit, and I wonder if maybe you can elaborate as far as your experience goes. There was a question about, like, is selling work to a business differ than selling work to like an individual or a private collection? Like, what are the similarities? How is it different?
That's a good question. I mean, at its core, it's the same. You hope that you are selling work that's meaningful to the person that's getting it. You know, we as a gallery try to sell to collectors and people that are going to present the work, or, you know, keep the work for a long time. That, like, I haven't actually sold to a corporate collection that's just like trying to invest in art. But, you know, you hope that the integrity of that transaction is in place, and that they have some understanding of what the artist's work is about, what the artist practice is about, all of that. I mean, the collections that I sell to regularly all care about that deeply. They do a lot of research beforehand. I might even argue that in some ways they've done more research than a private collector would, just because that's their job. They have time to do that. They punch the clock to research artists and build a collection. You know, I mean, maybe like some of the logistics of a sale and like what happens afterwards are a little easier because of a corporate collection, because they have multiple people working on behalf of that. So going kind of circling back, Eric, to the beginning of this and your mild confession about sort of the stigma attached to corporate collections, I find that the ones that we've worked with regularly are like kind of a dream come true. I mean, they have been pretty important to the building of the gallery. So in that way, like A+ in terms of what we're doing with them. But I think at its core, there's not like big differences, because again, you're still dealing with somebody, you know, speaking to the collections that we deal with directly. I'm working with a curator directly who is buying work on behalf of that collection. So the conversations are similar, you know, they are as involved as you hope they will be. Like they're as researched and thoughtful, and you know, most of the collections we're working with are thinking about inclusivity and thinking about diversity, and so there's kind of a win-win with all of it. Did that answer that?
I think that answered that quite, not in the direction I thought, which was
Okay.
Nice. Yeah, I like that.
I mean, can I turn it back to you as a fellow dealer and gallery owner? Has your experience been different?
I think they're strikingly similar. I think a lot of times with a business, there's more transparency in the interaction. Like I often understand that if I am showing work or in a discussion about placing work with someone who is building a collection for a business, I usually understand that they're also considering other works, and they're usually for specific projects. And so it can often be like, oh, we're, you know, building this new room or this new floor, like, and we need art for specific places, or, and that's not all the time, but it is some of the time. So it's usually specific projects, and they're also like, and I know this was a shock for you to learn that Jamie also talks to other galleries, but that does happen. And so, and so I usually know that like, that there's kind of a mild competition happening, but in a way that's always happening. So, you know, anything I could say about working with a business on placing art, there is an equivalent version of that for like a private collector. And that would be like my kind of, you know, just bare bones logistical, like that would be the difference for me. Which is that there's very little difference.
we have 15 minutes before the end, and I wanna get a chance to open it up to some questions, but I wanted to just kind of quickly give a quick plug. For those who don't know me, my name is Vincent Uribe. I'm with Arts of Life. We're a nonprofit art studio in Chicago with the location as well in the North Shore suburbs in Glenview. We have 2 gallery spaces that we call our Circle Contemporary Galleries, where we support artists' professional development, artists with and without disabilities. So currently with COVID, our exhibition spaces are closed, but we do have monthly virtual guest curated exhibitions, and our current exhibition is curated by artist Katie Kimmel. That's up online right now, which we'll post the link for. We have 2 more masterclass conversations happening in April and May, which I encourage you all to check out and register on different topics than tonight. Arts of Life is preparing for our large annual benefit auction, which will be online May 13th, where we'll be auctioning off a variety of works and experiences. Lots of artwork will be available that will make the perfect addition to anybody's collection. So I encourage you all to attend. It will be free as well. So with that said, I will pass it on to Sarah and Eric. I think we have some questions that folks are ready to ask.
Got some great questions and a couple of folks who wanted to ask directly. So I'm going to start with Raven, who had a question. I'm going to unmute Raven right now. And Raven, whenever you're ready.
All right, great, thanks. Thank you all for your insights, and thank you for Arts of Life for hosting this chat. Very interesting. I'm actually really curious about, I don't know, you mentioned how corporate collections are often working really locally and sometimes even have local metrics that they're trying to reach. does that ever play out in support of, smaller arts nonprofits like Arts of Life, or I don't know, more artist-run kinds of spaces?
I guess I'll take this one.
Question.
Yeah.
That's a good question.
It is a great question. And I think the answer to that is, in short, yes, certainly. We actually just acquired a piece from Arts of Life for a company. We were really excited about being able to place that. And equally so, they were excited. And I'm just going to share this real quick because it's a real goosebumpy, feel-good thing. But they literally wrote us a thank you note about that experience, like Arts of Life wrote a thank you note. They were thank you notes flying everywhere. And it just, honestly, it was like, that's what it's all about, like when you can make that happen, you've really done something. But yes, I mean, of course we're trying to, support artist-run spaces, local spaces. We definitely, I know DeGroot made an effort recently during the pandemic with some of the online art fairs. There were some newer galleries that were joining in what was kind of an unfortunate time to have your debutante moment out in the world. So we made an effort to really comb those and see, was there something that we could do to help those galleries that were just starting get up and get a purchase and make that happen. So we do think about that a lot. Sometimes it's just more broader strokes. What are you looking for? And it's almost a happenstance in some ways universally, right? It does, like Eric was saying, there's, you're looking often for a big picture, and sometimes that answer is in an artist-run space, and sometimes it's in a gallery you've been to many times. So it kind of depends, but certainly there's no rule against it, and we're here for it for sure.
Thank you for that. Actually, you just made me think of something else, if it's okay for me to ask. There's so much education that happens on your side too, I imagine, and working with corporate collections and working, just introducing them to new artists and to new galleries and just how the whole system works. Have you seen any, kinds of educational models inside of larger companies to engage employees about collecting art?
Yeah, definitely. So again, each company is a little different, but we don't often do a lot of rotating things because I really do try to encourage people to purchase what they can at the level they can purchase it at, because ultimately that is kind of the best story for everybody involved. But there are some circumstances where doing something on a lending basis does make sense for everyone involved. But we do a project where we rotate some lobbies back and forth, and I know that company is very excited to be able to send their email blast, for example, to all the residents in those buildings. So that kind of adds value. Not only do people see these things on the street as they're walking by or going to the train station, whatever, but also your education component there gets blasted to the thousands and thousands of residents and renters in that building for different companies, and it's very much an exciting thing for them to be able to offer that illuminating aspect of what they're doing. They're trying to connect community and their inhabitants of their building. So that's one way to do it. Another way, quite literally is just putting labels up next to the pieces. At DeGroot, we do a ton of writing. We're always trying to look at things and kind of, pull out what is it that would connect people when they're standing in front of us in a company, which is a little different than being in a museum or in an art gallery necessarily. These are people that are put in front of it for a different reason. So we try to find that voice that would be most universal and help people understand why this thing is in front of them and why it's okay to like it or dislike it, frankly, but that it's something there for them to consider, and that it's a dialogue with them. And so those labels mean a lot. And sometimes in even better scenarios, there's brochures and books that play and things like that. So there's definitely a lot having to do with education and wanting people to know what they're looking at. It isn't about ostracizing anybody, it's about bringing everybody together.
Thank you.
Sure, thank you.
So much, Raven, for your question. Another question to be asked directly from the audience, from Tolu, who I will unmute right now.
Wonderful. Thank you, guys. This has been a great discussion. Really enjoyed it this evening. My question is, I'm more curious about corporate collecting from an industry perspective. Or do you notice any trends in the type of companies or industries that decide to actually buy art?
Hospitals
Oh,
have
Oh, yeah, that's very true.
great, businesses in the medical field. There are some that have just really, really good, incredible art collections. Banks have really nice art collections that are very big. One of my favorite corporate collections is the Progressive Insurance Company. They have an incredible collection. Yeah, Sarah just wrote the Cleveland Clinic. That is like a highly respectable collection. What do you guys think?
All of those are important. I think mentioning hospitals is great because I think there's definitely a push to maybe add more humanity to the hospital setting by way of art, or like artist therapy, another kind of version of art therapy. And there seems to be more collecting in that direction. There's definitely been more startups, technology companies are starting to do more of that.
That's what I was going to say, Andrew. I feel like, for us, it's like, if it's not banks, it's like a bank with a technology branch or some sort of tech reference. But we've been doing a lot of that, which is actually, in terms of trend, interesting, because they do tend to like a different type of art in our experience. For example, we have one tech project we're working on, which is 1980s themed, which I'm personally very pumped about. I've been talking a lot about themes. They're not all themed, but I think they're just easy examples. But yeah, I mean, 80s theme, I'm here for that. That was a really fun research project to go back in my childhood and all that. But yeah, they look at things differently. And it's interesting to be on, like, we call them tastemaker meetings when we first talk to people. It's like we just show a bunch of stuff and just say, hey, tell us, you like this? You hate it? Like, we didn't make it, but let's just talk about it. Like, what screams out to you? What do you want to see? And so that's always fun to kind of get people to talk about how they're perceiving art. And there is kind of a difference, I think, between a banker and a tech person and what they want to look at. So that's a fun kind of exercise in learning humanity, right, and what they're after. So we definitely see that.
And banks and tech, I understand. This hospitals was a very surprisingly beautiful answer. And I'm curious, do you think that there's a difference in the type of art each different sector kind of goes for?
I think I think absolutely. I think there's also, there's already so many different strata to the art world to begin with that, like Jamie was saying, you have a project where it's 1980s themed. That would be hard for like Progressive to pivot and be like, now we're only going to buy 1980s themed art. Progressive is a collection that tends to collect deep on, like notable contemporary artists, up and coming artists, kind of across the board. So I think it's like anything else, or any individual collector. There's interests that are articulated through a collection.
I think that's a distinction that probably should be made too when I'm sitting here talking about themes. We work with both types of collections, but like Andrew's talking about, some people are coming from a very historical background of building these collections with some incredible names in them. And that is the other thing that we do. It's not always acquisition. Sometimes it's, culling through things that they've had in storage and doing the research and finding those beautiful gems that, they may have bought way back when and don't realize are so valuable now. So, we just had a project where we got to pull from the dark corners of a company just an incredible amount of like amazing Chicago Images pieces that we were able to restore and reframe and bring back to life and bring that educational component too. So that's kind of a different creature than when you're, talking 80s or whatever in a different scenario. But yeah, there are definitely different kind of looks and styles and motivations in that way. So the trend can be different. If people have a lot of space to cover, sometimes it's okay for them to have a tech department that's 80s, but they still have, their incredible Richard Serra painting in their lobby or whatever. But it all kind of depends. There's just so many different scenarios. I think it's hard to say.
Wonderful, thank you.
I have a quick question. I hope this doesn't preempt it. Maybe answer it really quickly, Jamie. Have you ever had to have you ever taken over a collection from somebody else and had the company think that they were sitting on the most amazing, like the most profitable investment of all time, and you've had to tell them that all of the art they bought is worthless?
Oh,
I don't mean worthless. That's a terrible way to put it, but you know what I mean? Like a company that is thinking about it from an investment standpoint, and somebody was managing their collection 30 years ago and either convinced them to buy artists that were like friends of theirs, or
That's where you're going with this.
Yeah. This is a weird question. Forgive me if it's.
No, I think that's a very practical thing that we run into all the time. And I think my answer to that is, art is a subjective thing. And frankly, it's always worthwhile to somebody. And so it's all about getting the art in the right place at the right time, moving it to the right people. And that's what we're here for. It's like, okay, is this not working for you anymore? Like, can we help you find a way to donate this to a hospital maybe, or to a college, so that this can be experienced in a different way? And then maybe make room for some new acquisitions that do kind of suit your needs. All said though, Andrew, like our big line is just like, well, nobody has a crystal ball, so buy what you love, because no one does. It'd be great if I was out here just being like, definitely buy that, you'll be a millionaire, and definitely buy that, you'll be a millionaire. That would be amazing. I'd do it for myself and I'd probably retire, but we don't have that crystal ball. So we just kind of, like I said at the beginning, kind of go with this sort of list of things where it's like, let's prioritize these things, let's try to hit a bunch of boxes, and let's ultimately make it something that you love, because you can't bank on that. And so, moving that art around that might be musty or not appreciated anymore, can go somewhere else and have a new life. And there's definitely some verbiage that we use for that to make everyone feel really good about what's happened. And
I should certainly have not used that word, and I didn't mean it in that way. I think what I was more interested in is, it's a difference between an individual collecting and this is a difference. An individual, if they're continuing to collect, they started at the beginning of this, but a corporation may have had a number of people in the process, some of whom may still be there, some who may not. So you're piecing history back together, which is also having to fold into what the history and the market of all that art looks like from, say, 1980 to now. And that's a complicated thing to articulate and manage and negotiate with somebody that may have been told something or promised something and gotten something else. And it's also just time, right? Time changes things.
Certainly. And I think it's about valuing people and what their goals are in that moment. We can't change like what happened, but it's like just making sure you kind of navigate that situation so that they don't feel so bad about it that they don't collect again, right? Like that's
Right.
never our intention. And like it, in some ways, you know, like it's sick. It's a cycle for art, you know, and just kind of getting them to understand, you know, that they're part of it and that's still important. And it may not have turned out how they wanted, but there's always tomorrow and there's always a new piece.
I want to thank everyone for joining. Eric, Jamie, Andrew, I appreciate you, lending your time tonight and your insight and your expertise. We hope we see everyone at our next conversation. The links are in the chat. And I hope everyone has a great rest of their evening. Thanks.
Thank you so much, everybody. Coming.
Thanks.
I wonder, before we all leave, because there was a question asked and they're still here. We can do this super fast, but it's just very take away all the curtains and the how do you get paid as an art advisor?
Oh,
and I want to add
that.
I want to extend that to Andrew to say, like, how do we get paid as dealers? How does the money work? Just real fast. It's
okay. I think my short answer to that is, Eric, that each advisor is different. I think there is no one size fits all way of being nourished as an art advisor. I think it depends on your circumstances. And I will say in mine, what I prioritize is finding a model that nourishes everyone involved as much as possible. So that means trying my hardest to make sure my client gets what they want and that the galleries and the artists and the vendors that I work with are being valued as high as they can be. And a lot of that actually has to do with transparency. So I run it real clear and free over here as much as I can, in hopes that, everyone will in time know that, we're all out for the greater good and we're trying to work together. So part of what I try to do is explain to people how we work, but that is much more complicated than a quick answer. So I won't get into it, but I think just to answer your question, each advisor is different. And I'll be honest, I have no idea how some other advisors do it. It's a mystery to me too.
Is it generally, depending on different folks, it's generally a project fee or percentage? Is that correct, or is that way off?
I think again, it's just totally depends. Like ours is kind of like a hybrid model
Sure.
that does a little bit of all of it. It's very complicated in some ways because it also depends on the client, and each client is set up a little bit differently as well. But yeah, yes and no. Sorry, Vincent. I wish it was that easy to explain.
I'll never forget the first time an advisor, we made a sale through an advisor because I didn't really know how that worked. And all of a sudden a sale had happened and I had really had to do very little. And somebody else did all of the hard work. And I've never really looked back from that. I've always been grateful to work with advisors because they're on the ground, like making things happen. Jamie works so hard. I'm always excited to work with you, and Jamie makes it really easy. It makes it possible for me as an owner of a gallery to also spend more time focused on being in the gallery and putting on the exhibition and focusing on that. So in terms of percentages, I'm so lucky to work with advisors like you, Jamie.
I'm gonna blush.
Part of the big, it really is sort of the proof of how, if you stay in this business long enough and you make those relationships, there's a bit of an ecological relationship to all of it. It's an ecosystem that kind of actually is efficient, even though we're not all in the same place. We're all kind of working on each other's behalf.
Absolutely.
And I second transparency. I mean, every once in a while, I still come across an advisor who wants to kind of like keep their discount with the client like separate and all of that. And I'm so grateful that I also have done this long enough that I can say no to that, because transparency is critical.
Thank you all. I appreciate
And
it.
that's, and I should say that's also on the artist's end, right? Like the transparency starts wherever it starts, it goes to all parts of it. So that the artist also knows that there's an advisor involved and that they're taking a percentage. Artists tend to like, I mean, all the artists we work with know that, that, you know, they understand that that's part of the process. For any artists that are listening in that want to know that. It's
And I don't
kind
want
of
to
a,
complicate this, but we actually don't always take a percentage of the process. Part of our transparency is, you know, we get industry discounts offered to us on occasion, which we are very grateful for, and it does help propel this relationship and this ecosystem that Andrew is talking about. But when we ask for a discount, it is oftentimes so we can wedge more artwork into a space and nourish and purchase more things. It is not so that we can put money in our pockets. We're never trying to make money off of an artist. I think that for me was a very important difference in how I wanted to set my company up, so that if the artist wins, we win. So if the gallery wins, we win. I you know, try very hard to get people to understand that, you know, we are by no means trying to abuse any system of percentages being taken off or anything like that. And the other side of that coin is we are given that in good faith, knowing that it keeps this ecosystem moving, you know, and I won't take it if I don't have to. So I just want to make that clear, because I think there is this kind of idea that all the consultants are out there, you know, with their visor on, with their pencil, being like, okay, 10% here, 20% there. No, it doesn't work that way. So, and not for us, but we really made that short answer very long for you, Eric.
I don't know. I like the taking away the mystery of how this all works, questions though. So
absolutely.
I do. I love being honest about stuff like this, because I think it really helps everybody, and you know, I certainly needed somebody to be honest with me about all this in order to get here. You know, we all have to grow together. So I try very hard to, when asked a question, let people know what I know.
Right.
Well, thanks again, everyone. I think this was super insightful, and I appreciate everyone joining us tonight.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
Vincent.
Thanks.
Vincent, thanks, Betsy. Thanks, Sarah.
Looking forward to your auction.
Thanks. Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.